So the issue with Colin Kaepernick during the peak of Colin Kaepernick's stardom has always been that he started a movement. There's no denying that Colin Kaepernick started a movement. There are still athletes everywhere who kneel before the American national anthem. Okay? But he kind of disappeared off the face of the earth in terms of taking hold of it. Like, you lead a movement, but then you disappear. You have to be the face of that movement. Even the good works that he did behind the scenes was more behind the scenes, which you can respect from the standpoint of like, look, I'm donating money. I want to change. I want the betterment of society. It's not for show. It's for real stuff. I get it. But you're allowing other people to spread what your narrative is, to tell us what when like he can do an interview with whomever and they'll do the interview. What really happened? Why really are you out of the NFL? What do you think? What was the real conversations like? How much did you really want to make when you went to Seattle? What really happened with Baltimore when your then girlfriend put out a meme of the owner, Steve, Bisciotti, and likened him to Django Unchained's slave owner, right? What was that really like? We finally got some of these answers. Colin Kaepernick sat down with Brandon Marshall. Of course, Brandon was a star wide receiver in the NFL. He was most recent with Fox. Now he is not. And Brandon has a podcast, I'm an Athlete. It's a YouTube show. And he was asked if he would be willing to play for the minimum.
I know I have to find my way back in. Okay. So, yeah, if I have to come in as a backup, that's fine. But that's not where I'm staying. And when I prove that I'm a starter, I want to be able to step on the field as such. I just need that opportunity to walk through the door.
Okay, there's a flaw there. Okay? There's a flaw there. Now, look, every backup should want to be a starter. Every guy who was a starter should want to be a starter. It should be pointed out that the guy was last good in the NFL in 2013. Like, that was the last year he was a good player. He started in 2016. And I think anybody would be reasonable and say he was on a bad football team, but dude, they were 1-10 in his 11 starts. So that was 6 seasons ago. Start with coming into this year, 6 seasons ago. So if you're advising Colin Kaepernick, you go, the last part should be all he should say. Hey, fact of the problem here, I'm just happy to be here. Whatever I just want to be part of a team. I just want to go. I will play for whatever. I just want back in the league. Of course, eventually I'd like to work towards having the opportunity to start, but you can't get there. Instead, he's like, man, I'm not staying there forever. I'm approved. I'm like, okay. That's a turnoff to a lot of people. Now, the fact that he said he'd play for the minimum was great because you go back 4 years ago, 5 years ago, when there was a push by people, well, why is he? Because he wanted starter money, and no one saw him as a starter. Oh, yeah, by the way, if you're going to be a backup in the NFL and you're a veteran, what is your job? Anybody? To get the starter ready. It's a sacrifice of self. It's a different job than being the job of a starter. Here's Kaepernick on why he believes he deserves another chance.
You have end racism in the back of your end zone. You got Black Lives Matter on your helmet. Everything I've said should be in alignment with what you're saying publicly. It's a $16 billion business. When I first took a knee, my jersey went to number 1. When I did the deal with Nike, their value increased by $6 billion. $6 billion with a B. If you're talking about the business side,
it makes sense.
It shows beneficial. Yeah. If you're talking about the playing side, come in, let me compete. You can evaluate me from there. The NFL is supposed to be a meritocracy. Come in, let me compete. If I'm not good enough, get rid of me. But let me come in and show you.
That part is music to the ears. The problem is he said so many damaging things. You called it slave trade. He called the NFL draft slave trade. And you liken the images of black men being sold into slavery hundreds of years ago to NFL players. it is utterly and completely ridiculous. No one with any sort of brain thinks that being a professional football player is slavery. Right? Slavery is forced labor without compensation. Right? It's the only thing similar is that there's a percentage of them that are black. So that one's a tough one to get over. You know? That and the idea of end racism, that somehow, by the way, the Nike $6 billion increase in valuation, like, look, Nike's business is good no matter what. Was his commercial great? Their commercial was amazing. Was amazing. Great ad campaign. Do they still make money on it today? Like, no. And is there the hypocrisy of other stuff with Nike? Of course there is. Right? Of course there is. Here's Kaepernick talking about it being a passion project.
I think more than anything, it's a passion. Like, you had those dreams from when you're a kid. I mean, like, I'm going to be an NFL player, and I'm going to win a Super Bowl. And for me, I have unfinished business on that front. I've been to the Super Bowl. We're one play away. It's like, well, I need to finish that.
Yeah, there's a lot there. There's a lot to unpack there. But I do think that was a snapshot into, his mentality, which is the mentality for a lot of guys. You feel like, your career was cut short because he went into, kind of political warfare, if you will. My issue is like, you can't be the backup quarterback or the third string quarterback, okay, and be the center of attention. It doesn't work. It's never worked. He wasn't good. He hasn't been a good quarterback since 2014 or so, 2013. So there's so many delusions there. Do I like the idea of, hey man, I just want to compete, show you what I got? Great. Reality is that it would cause such a stir. As I talked to one NFL GM, it's not signing him that's the problem. It's cutting him that is. What teams could actually take him? Right? What teams could actually take him? Yes, stand by.
Well, I think that there are a variety of teams. And Seattle was always a team that was connected to him. I mean, we don't think that the Seahawks have any really good quarterbacks in Seattle, and he still probably wouldn't make that team. So they could just, even if he gets into a preseason game and maybe ends up showing what he has or doesn't have, I think that could make the decision easier. But I will also say something that I think that you may want to take back something that you said earlier in the show, because I actually feel this way now. And you said, I know we're going to talk about Colin Kaepernick and it may be tiring. I actually find this conversation, and I felt like I could hear it in your voice, as a refreshing conversation, because you're actually talking about Colin Kaepernick and his football abilities, which for a while is something that we could not do. We're talking about team fits without so much, vitriol, I guess would be the word, of from one side and then the other. Like, I think it's awesome to talk about Colin Kaepernick and not get everybody, get their undies in a bundle about it, whether they're on what side or, whose side they're on. Talking about whether he can make it back in the NFL, on how he plays, I actually think is refreshing.
Well, that part, I agree with you. And if I didn't articulate it in that way, if I didn't say it in that way, I was wrong. Because what I thought I tried to do is, yes, normally you bring up Colin Kaepernick, and everybody goes, ugh.
Yes.
I'm just, enough, right? Enough. Like, we're good. We're moved on. But this is one where he's like, I'll play for anything. Like, all right, well, I actually haven't heard him speak, and we haven't talked just about football. Now, I think the flaw in his argument is that, and some of this is, I haven't listened to the full scope of the interview, but it's like saying you want to play because it's good for business. What you just said is a meritocracy. So what does business have to do with it? What have you done? Who have you worked with? How have you stayed sharp? How the league has evolved greatly. A lot of schemes have changed. things have changed. Like, we're talking over a half decade since he took a snap in the NFL, and last time he took a snap, he was not good. Okay, don't give me touchdown to interception like they were bad. They're bad. And he wasn't the only part of being bad. But there was a reason that even previous to that, he had lost his starting job. So there's a lot there. I agree with you, Dan, wholeheartedly. We just talk about football. I also don't know if we can actually if a team could actually evaluate him in a fair scale. It's like, for example, I know you don't like Drew Lock, and people think Drew Lock and what's the other
Geno
former
Smith?
starting Geno Smith. Like, if you put him with Geno Smith and Drew Lock, and you have him legitimately compete, right? Like, people just don't want to hear that. NFL people think Geno Smith's pretty good, solid backup, right? That when he signed with the Chargers as their backup, the reason they signed him was they called New York, and the Giants, remember, were like, we really like Geno Smith. When he started, remember, he ended Eli's starting streak?
Mm-hmm.
Okay? When he started, it was as a reward to Geno Smith because he had done everything right as a backup. As a guy who's a former starter, like, he didn't pout. He was great in the scout team. He throws a good ball. He's an NFL quarterback. He's done all the right things. Drew Lock, I don't think you could say the same. Hasn't done all the right things. That's one of the reasons that they soured on him in Denver, but does have a lot of talent. The problem is that it takes a guy with, and I don't even know if Pete's got it. It takes a guy with brass balls to go, he ain't even, because you can't tell from the preseason. Most of these guys look good in the preseason. So, yeah, I don't know how that looks. I don't know if you can get a true football evaluation when he's involved. I think the best possible scenario, again, I continue to say it, was Baltimore. Because you got Greg Roman there, who was his offensive coordinator, was in San Francisco. You got John Harbaugh, who, of course, he played for his brother Jim. And you have Lamar Jackson. No one's going to say he should start ahead of Lamar Jackson. But you put him as the third-string quarterback, for example, there. And suddenly now he gets him back in the league, gets him back into shape. He plays in the preseason. You get some eyes on him. And maybe then the problem with that is, are you going to convince that owner? Okay, the owner was going to sign him in Baltimore. And Colin Kaepernick's then girlfriend, I don't know if they're even still together, put out a meme essentially calling him a slave owner. I'm like, Steve Bishop, why do I have to do that? You're calling me a racist? By the way, both the quarterbacks in Baltimore happen to be black. Right? Like, I really think that Colin Kaepernick is going on dated info. Don't get me wrong. There's no denying that he started a movement. His problem with starting a movement was it became a leaderless, rudderless ship. And other people took it and ran with it. And then ultimately, when he cashed in on the Nike one, when he cashed in and took whatever the payout was to the NFL, that seemed to seal his fate.